In this video, I'm going to show you the free tool that I use to design a lot of my Facebook ads and other graphic designs as well. So it's called GIMP. You can go to gimp.org and download a copy of it yourself for free. And what I'm going to show you how to do in this video is basically a demonstration on how I create these thumbnails for my YouTube channel. So that's going to provide a demonstration of how to use GIMP and a lot of the tools so that you can create something similar yourself. So I've gone ahead and opened up GIMP and I have this image open in here. But what I'm going to do here is click on File, New, and create a new document. I'm going to make it 500 pixels wide by 500 pixels tall, and then hit enter. I'm going to make this full screen. So the reason that I like GIMP is because it's kind of like Photoshop, but it's dumbed down a little bit. So it's going to be a little bit more advanced than Paint, but obviously not quite as advanced as Photoshop. But the reason that I like it is because of two primary reasons. First of all, the layers feature, which I'll show you in a minute, and then transparency. So the layers feature basically allows you to create different images and have them stack on top of each other, and then you can adjust the transparency of those layers to create some pretty interesting graphics. Something that you can't do in Paint, and I find that it's a really helpful tool for creating a lot of the Facebook ads that I like to create. So then on the left hand side here we have this toolbox window. This is where we're going to select the tools that we use to create our image. If you don't see either of these windows open, you can go to Windows and then click on Toolbox or Layers, and it'll open up those windows for you. So right now we have one layer which is named background, and it's all white. So what we can do from here is right click on New Layer, and then we have all sorts of options for this new layer. The only thing that I really focus on is this fill with. So we can choose whether we want this new layer to be filled completely with the foreground color, which right now is red, the background color, which is white, or we can just do white, or I like to just select transparency. And what that's going to do is create a fully transparent layer. So if I hide this background layer, you can see that this top layer is fully transparent. That's what this checkerboard means. So what we want to try and achieve is something that looks kind of like this, where we have an image, we've got some different colors, some text. I think that's going to allow us to walk through some of the key tools that I use in this program. So first of all, what we want to do is create that background image. And so what I'm going to do is open up this image of a house that I have here. I'm going to do Control A, Control C, just to copy that image. I'm going to go back to our other document. Click on the background, press Control V, it's going to paste the image, and we can see here that it's really large, obviously too large for our 500 by 500 pane. And right now we're zoomed into 100%, so if I just click onto this and zoom out to, let's say, 12.5%, you can see that the image outline is obviously much bigger than our full image. So I'm going to click on the scale tool here. I'm going to click and hold, and then I'm going to hold Control, and that's going to allow me to scale the image down proportionately. So I'm going to scale that down to about there. I'm going to hit enter. It's going to take a moment to scale. Now I'm going to click on the selection tool, and then you can see as I hover over, this image has a dotted line that's kind of moving. So right now that image is not anchored to a layer, so I can kind of drag it around and move it. So I'm going to put it in the center like that. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And then what I'm going to do is just click off, and you can see how there's that little anchor icon, and that's just going to anchor it to that layer. So now that image has been anchored to this background. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to Colors, Desaturate, and then Desaturate, and then just press OK. And you'll see that that just strips all of the colors out of this image. So that's kind of what I do to achieve this effect here. So once I desaturate that image, I'm going to click on this new layer. I'm going to find a color that I like. Let's find a yellow color. Press OK. I'm going to click on the Paint tool. I'm going to click on the center of the image, and that's going to fill that entire layer with that color. So I'm going to zoom back in a little bit. And another thing you can do is hold Control and then just scroll the mouse on your wheel, or the wheel on your mouse, and it'll scale your image. So right now all we can see is yellow because that layer is on top. So if I were to click on that and then click on this down button, it's going to move that layer below, and so now we can only see this layer that's on top. So if I were to make that layer invisible, then obviously we can see everything that's underneath of it. Or if I click on this layer, go up here to opacity, and then type in 50, it's going to make this image have an opacity of 50%, so it's slightly transparent, so that we can see the layers that are below it. So that's one way of achieving that effect. Another thing that I might do is bring this back to full opacity, click on this mode drop down, and then click on soft light. And that'll achieve a slightly different effect, but pretty similar. So if you like the way that this looks, then what I might do is right click on this, say merge down, and that's just going to merge that layer with the layer immediately beneath it. So now we just have one layer with all of that effect into it. Alright, so now what we want to do is create this text on top of this text box, basically. So what I'm going to do is do Control-Shift-N. It's going to create a new layer, and then I'm going to click on the text tool, or you can press T, and then I'm going to click on this. If you click on this, it's going to default to black and white as the foreground and background color. So I'm going to click and drag, and then I'm going to type some text here. I'm going to select all that text, and then I'm going to select a font that I like, and then over here I'm going to center that text. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, and I'm going to make this bottom one a different color, just like that. So I like the way that that looks, and right now we can see that we have a text layer all by itself. So if I right click on that and I say merge down, it's going to merge that text layer down onto this next transparent layer, and now we can no longer edit that text. So now it just becomes an object. So I can basically cut and edit that as if it were its own image layer, as opposed to just a text layer. So what I'm going to do is cut that, paste it. I'm going to move them a little bit closer together by pressing the down key on my computer. And now we want to add a layer beneath this text so that we can see it a little bit better. So I'm going to click onto this bottom layer and then press Control-Shift-N. That's going to create a new layer above it. We're going to make that a transparent layer. And so right now I have a black foreground color. So I'm going to select the rectangle tool, draw a rectangle around that. I pressed Shift B, or you can just select the paint bucket. I'm going to fill that rectangle with that color. What I'm going to do is create another new layer just above that, and I'm going to flip this and make the foreground color white. I'm going to draw a rectangle around that, fill it with white. Now you can see I selected a portion of the image that is overlapping this black box, but because this layer is beneath that layer, obviously it's going to be beneath it so you don't see it. So what I'm going to do, if I'm happy with that effect, what I'm noticing is that the spacing between here and here is a little bit different. So I'm going to go back to our text layer. I'm going to cut that and just kind of fix it so that it's a little bit more equal. So now I'm happy with how that looks. I'm just going to click on this layer, right click, merge down, right click again, merge down. And so now we've merged all three of those layers into one. So now it's one single object. So now what I'm going to do is do Control A, Control X. I'm going to paste it so that now we have an object that we can click and move around. And what I'm going to do is click on the Skew tool. The shear tool is what they call it. So we're going to click on that. I'm going to click and hold and then drag. And that's just going to shear the image, kind of like this, right? So we're just going to do it slightly and then hit enter. And I'm happy with how that looks. So already we're getting pretty close to how this effect looks. The only other thing that might be different is adding a, what would you call this? A vignette? I don't know how you pronounce it. So I'm going to click on this layer, Control-Shift-N, create a new layer above it. I'm going to make the foreground black, and then I'm going to click onto this gradient tool. And what the gradient tool does by default is it creates a gradient. Right now it's just a straight line gradient from the foreground to background color. So that's not what I want. What I want, first of all, is to select this, do foreground to transparent, and then I'm going to click on the shape and make it radial. And then actually I'm going to click on this and flip it so that it's transparent to the foreground. I'm going to click on the center of the screen, and then I'm going to drag out until I kind of achieve that effect that I'm looking for here. So that looks about right. It might be a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to click on the opacity, type in maybe 75, maybe 80 or so, just to bring it down a little bit. All right, so that's not looking too bad. The other thing I might do is show you how to use the pen tool or the path tool. I'm actually going to screenshot this image here. I'm going to go back. I'm going to create a new layer on top. I'm going to paste that image. And what I'm going to try and do is show you how to achieve this white outline effect that you see a lot of people using. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to click on this pen tool. And the way that this pen tool works is you basically connect the dots like this, and it draws a path. And if I hit enter, it's going to connect that and make a path. So if I do Control X, you can see it just cuts out that path that we just created. So what I'm going to do is use this to draw an outline around myself here so that we can create that outline effect. So I'm going to click back onto the path tool. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, and I'm just going to start clicking. And then if I click and hold and then drag it, we can create these nice smooth lines. So this is how probably the best way to go about tracing objects. And now you can see that this arm here is all the way down here. So if I click up here, it's going to create this weird shape like that. And the reason for that is because it's trying to draw a line that starts out this way and then ends up back at this point here. So all I'm going to do is click and drag this arm so that it's pointing in that direction, and then that fixes that problem. So I'm just going to do this real quick so you can understand the concept here. And then hit enter, and I'm going to press Control Copy, and I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to paste that. I'm going to click off of it so it anchors that on that new layer. And then if I zoom out and then hide that bottom layer, you can see that we just have my floating head here. So then what I would do from here, typically I'm not going to scale up an image because it's going to reduce the quality, but I'm just going to make this a bit bigger so that we can actually see here. And then what I'm going to do from here is right click on the layer, say alpha to selection, and that's just going to put a selection around your image. And then I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make sure that I have white selected as my foreground because that's the color of the outline that we want to make. I'm going to go to select, grow, and then this is how much bigger you want this image to be. So if I put in 10, it's going to grow that outline by 10 pixels outwards. So then if I select the paint tool and then paint it with the foreground color, that makes it white. I'm just going to anchor that by clicking off here, and then I'm going to drag this, or I'm going to click on it and then click on this down button to put it behind. And then I'm going to merge this down so that now this is a single layer. And then let's put this down here. Go back to this text layer and kind of put it up here. And then the last thing I'm going to show you how to do, I'm going to delete this layer. I'm going to merge these two together. I'm going to right click, alpha to selection. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to make black the foreground color. I'm going to go to my paint tool and paint this black. Now what I'm going to do is do Control A and select this entire image. Go to filters, blur, Gaussian blur, and then from here I'm going to basically just fiddle around with these numbers here and create a blur effect that I'm happy with. So let's say that that looks good to me. I'm going to press OK, and then I might do, if I just put this behind, you'll see that that creates kind of a shadow effect. It just kind of makes those elements pop out from the screen a little bit. And so that's kind of the process that I go through for creating these types of thumbnail graphics. And I do similar kind of processes when I create my Facebook ads as well. Obviously they look quite a bit different than my YouTube thumbnails, but that's kind of a very quick demonstration of how to use GIMP, a completely free tool that allows you to do a lot of different things. I know this is a pretty quick tutorial, but if you get some value out of this and you'd like me to go through and create a more detailed tutorial on how to use this tool, just leave a comment below and let me know, and I can maybe put together a playlist of videos for you. Other than that, that's all I've got for you guys in this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch. I'll see you in the next one.